Greetings, travelers, and welcome to a review of Xenoblade Chronicles X for the Wii U. Now, this is possibly unusual, and I may not do a video review again. I don't know. However, it's, as you can tell by the title, it is a review and rant. I am going to be ranting about a couple of things towards the end. Well, at the end, to be specific. Anyway, the footage you are seeing is actually me leveling up Irina, Gwyn, and Doug so that they are ready to be in level 50 skills and help me with various quests when I finally get back to actually LPing this as aftergame. In the meantime, let's get into my review. Actually, one final thing, I'm not going to be reviewing this with a score, but rather I'm going to steal some review scores that I like. I've seen it on Game Explain, which is a, meh, liked, didn't like, blah blah blah. I'll tell you how I feel at the end. Anyway, starting with the presentation of the game. Presentation is a combination of graphics, aesthetics, music, voice acting. It's basically how the player sees the world. Anyway, Xenoblade Chronicles X is a very nice game to look at. The world is expansive and gorgeous. The draw distance is impressive, though it does suffer from constant pop-in, and there are also times when the higher resolution textures take a moment to fully load. It is obvious that Xenoblade Chronicles X is taxing the Wii U to its absolute limits. Still, the world is absolutely teeming. Mira is alive, which is helped by dynamic weather, and everyone and everything has its own schedule. You can walk the world and see predators eating a corpse, you can see various creatures heading down to watering holes for a drink, or even a dip. I often heard an herbivore eating foliage, usually in a herd and with their young. That always impressed me. And that's the thing. I found several groups of creatures with young following their parent or parents. The entire world was just fascinating to explore, and distinctions are littered throughout Mira. I wanted to see everything, from vistas to creatures, even if the latter easily crushed me. And there were times when creatures easily just, hello, dead, to me. So, while vistas and creatures look great, there are several other inhabitants of Mira. Foremost among the inhabitants are humans. Obviously, your avatar is among the humans who crash-landed on Mira. One common criticism against human models is their faces, and for me, it more reminded me of the Xenosaga trilogy on PS2, so it was never off-putting to me. However, I was off-put by the lip-syncing and, to a slightly lesser extent, the body expression. Character expression during conversation was a little strange, though it did allow their emotions to get across. Also, not all characters, or even scenes, are voice acted. There is a lot of voice acting, and it's actually quite good. And I also enjoyed the music, so there's that plus. Touching back on the races, the various Xenos were distinct and very fun to learn about. I probably like the Orphe best, as an insectoid Xeno. This is me reading off of a script, okay? They are herbivores and actually do have a semi-hive mind. They are scientists with very little ability to fight, and they are led by an Ova. And to learn what the Ova is, I recommend watching my series or playing the game for yourself. We also had the return of the Nopon. Now, not a popular opinion, I'm going to state this right out front, but I was never the biggest fan of these little round furballs. They're cowardly and proud, often attributing the achievements of those around them to themselves, which they rarely actually do anything. Yes, they are excellent merchants, and I'll give them that they have mercantile skills. And because of their merchant skills, they actually lead nomadic lives, and their overall designs do lend well to that idea. They are also apparently quite tasty if the prone are anyone to believe. Prone are going to be brought up in a moment. Next, the Munon are one of the most technologically advanced races that the humans actually end up partnering with. They strangely have kind of a childlike behavior, which is weird. And they're also about the size of a human child anyway, so maybe it's expectations based on the weird whatever is going on Mira. They aren't proud, which is a plus, and they readily share their technology. So they're fairly fun to get along with. Next are the Zarubogan. They are another spacefaring race like the Orphe and Manon. They dress in heavy have-mad-like suits, that's how I want to describe it, and they feed on toxins that are fatal to other races. And I'm drawing a blank on what the toxins are called off the top of my head. I didn't write it down in my notes. Not my notes, but my script, so go figure. They also aren't, strangely enough, as technologically minded as the other races. They actually go out and find the technology that they're going to use, and it actually has a bit of a religious reference, which is interesting. The technology was left behind by their god. Go figure. Anyway, another race. Another favorite race, actually. The Roth. They have a samurai-like culture, and a particular party member points out that they are distinctly cat-like, so go Tatsu there. This feline race is incredibly honor-bound, and they hate watching the strong prey upon the weak. They love having strong opponents, so they view humans as potential for allies because they can stand with them, and potential for enemies because, hey, they're fun to fight. So that's going to be an interesting partnership later on, I'm sure. Next are kind of the enemy races that you run across, and you can befriend the first two. I'm just going to say that out front. The prone are the first enemies that humanity really runs across. They are brutal and menacing. There are two distinct tribes, and their clothing and attitudes actually differentiate these countrymen. While they do have a love for war, they also love dance, and I found that just fascinating, the things that you find out about these various cultures. They also have a strong affinity with creatures, and they can tame them. They also, like the Roth, they also have a deep-seated honor system to drive them, as you can see when you watch their marriage ceremony, among other things. Next are the Definian. They are rather unique. Actually, going back to the Orphe right quick, the Orphe are actually unisex. The Definian actually seem to be comprised entirely of females. It's not pointed out why, and my guess is they're probably clones. They're controlled by their central figure, their Queen Fortune, and they wear suits that basically shield them in an optical illusion. Not really shield, because if you touch them, you'll notice it's an illusion. And the suits also seem to deliver information on any subject that they've scanned, including personality and knowledge that that subject has. Finally, the Ganglion. They are the main enemy of humanity. They are cruel in their pursuit of humanity. Wow, that sounded horrible. They are cruel in their pursuit of humanity. They will enlist any help they can, even if they must enslave entire races. In the beginning, I actually found it difficult to tell if they were a syndicate of many races or a single race, but that does become clearer as you play the game. And that's really what I liked about it. You know, it's clear that every race has a distinct background, and it feeds into their appearance and behavior. I really did love exploring the world and the peoples of Xenoblade Chronicles X, and I was encouraged, and I would encourage everybody to seek out every nook and cranny. However, how does the game actually play? Well, first of all, Xenoblade Chronicles X has a complex and very rewarding system. There is a learning curve, obviously, but you are encouraged to explore every option on your own. The menu system opens up to lots of options, including control of some of the UI. You also have access to information on enemies you've encountered, collectibles, and every character you've talked to, so there's a lot of information available for you. There are thankfully few tutorials, so there's no hand-holding, and Xenoblade Chronicles X would rather briefly introduce you to new concepts with quick tips. The player is required to dig deeper, which is really, really rewarding. At its most basic, Xenoblade Chronicles X takes and improves upon Xenoblade Chronicles' battle system. But the gamepad adds more control options than the previous entry could have on the Wii. I won't go over the controls here, but they are simple enough to learn. The real depth comes from the systems just beneath the surface. While arts are obvious and appear on the art palette, skills have to be attached to enhance characters in specific ways. Some increase damage of particular damage types, like physical, ether, or gravity. Some work with arts to improve debuffs, like longer sleep effects. While your avatar can experience any class, your party members are stuck in one. They still have enough depth and skill and arts to differentiate them as you build your team. I personally appreciate how they are built out, as it ensures players can experience their game in their own way. The player can determine his or her own playstyle, and the diverse cast can help to personalize to just that. So you don't have to be playing with the same characters all the time. You might play differently because you pick different characters to meet your playstyle. In addition to arts and skills, the player can further customize their playstyle with augments available on clothing. These augments come in two forms. Some are built into the clothing, and some can be socketed in. The player can even ensure, at least shops, carry better gear by upgrading the various arms and manufacturers. I'm pretty sure AM or arms manufacturer levels do not affect gear dropped by enemies, but I can't be sure. I haven't delved quite that deeply yet. I'm sure I will need to in the aftercare. As you manage your AMs, custom gear and augment crafting becomes quite apparent. After all, crafting is located at the same terminal as the AM management. With the right items, you can craft a plethora of useful equipment and augment jewels to fit into sockets. You can also upgrade preset augments and gear, which is nice. Finally, the coup de grace of Xenoblade Chronicles X. After a certain point in the story, you gain access to powerful and mobile skells. They may not level up, but they have access to almost everything its human pilot has. They are also enhanced by stronger pilots, so their capabilities in combat reflect how you've raised your team. A few things to note about battle before moving on is, there are a few... I'm sorry, I about choked on something there. A few things to note about battle before moving on in the review. Your avatar and party members can equip skills, but skills cannot. Your avatar and party members can enhance arts by waiting for a secondary or, when overdrive is active, tertiary cooldowns. Skills cannot. Also note that skills require fuel for combat and, later on, flight. While in overdrive, they consume no fuel, so it might be the perfect time to go crazy with skill arts. I'm sure I missed many topics, but gameplay of Xenoblade Chronicles X is easily deep enough to discuss for hours. The myriad of choice in Soul Voice alone is enough to stagger the mind, so forgive me for not covering that topic. However, I can say that it is worth delving into. Now for the story of Xenoblade Chronicles X. It tells the story in a slightly different way than many other RPGs that I can think of. It certainly deviates from the almost normal way that Xenoblade Chronicles tells its story. This is not to say either direction is bad, but it takes more effort to get story the way Xenoblade Chronicles X presents things. Start out the game creating an avatar to represent you in the story, and I can see how some think this puts the avatar, supposedly the main character, into the back seat. However, that's the question. Is your avatar really the main character? For the time being, I'll refer to the avatar as my personal character, Gabriel, for the purposes of this review and for ease. Gabriel is awoken by Elma and told of the destruction of Earth. He is set on course to eke out a living on Mira with the remainder of humanity and varied creatures who live there. He quickly proves his worth to New Los Angeles, their new home on a strange new world. He is made a blade and assigned to a team led by Elma. I have seen some label Elma as the actual main character, but both she and another team member, Lin Li Ku, are present on every story mission. In the end, however, does it even matter if Gabriel was the main character? The struggle felt all the more real because my vision centered around him, and he centered around the story unfolding. I felt just as immersed as other stories, perhaps more so. I felt like I learned about and befriended the various characters within the universe, and I'm perfectly okay with that. However, that still doesn't answer the question, how does Xenoblade Chronicles X present its story differently than other RPGs? Well, every RPG that I can think of off the top of my head tells you about the world and characters surrounding you through the main story quest. You can certainly learn about side characters and history through side quests, but the main quest tells you about the characters who are important to your team. In a way, Xenoblade Chronicles X tosses that tradition. You certainly learn important characteristics about important team members in the world at large. However, the best and meatiest details are left to side quests. The game even encourages you to take on side quests by pausing between major events, separating them as chapters. Through the chapters, you learn that everybody has a great deal of respect for Elma. You don't learn the specifics of why they have respect for Elma unless you take on her affinity missions. You know Lin Li is a great mechanic and people trust her. You don't know why a girl of a mere 13 years is such a trusted mechanic unless you take on her affinity missions. I could go on about why Irina is tough, or Gwen desperately wants to protect Irina, or Doug throws himself into dangerous and profitable work, or so on and so forth. You can complete the game without discovering any of this, but really? What fun is that? Xenoblade Chronicles X is heavy on side content, and it's not a bad thing. It continues the game long after the main story is over. It feels like there is always something left to discover, and sometimes a side quest will lead you to or near a secluded spot that you might have missed before. Other side quests might introduce you to a character you accidentally looked over. Overall, these elements combine to make Xenoblade Chronicles X a game I cannot recommend more. It engaged me more than any other game I've played so far this generation. It can stand tall next to Xenoblade Chronicles. I fully look forward to any sequels that may come. There are enough cliffhangers to work off of. However, there is a darker side I'd like to address. As the title states, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a review and rant. What could I possibly rant about after the glowing review above? It has to do with the unfair tax Xenoblade Chronicles X received before localization was completed and as content was revealed by review copies. It is understandable that certain assets were changed. I'm sorry, not understandable. It is undeniable that certain assets were changed during localization. A slider was removed from female customization, often referred to as the bust slider. It was likely removed to prevent players from creating a character roughly the same size as Lin Li. Why? Well, Lin Li's swimsuits were altered to cover her more, so it seems rather obvious the reason why. The ESRB, PEGI, and other boards have pretty strange track records when it comes to acceptable standards in games. At best, they are questionable. At worst, they are tyrannical. There is a heavy cost in submitting games to a review board, and they control and regulate a lot of content before it can be released. The aforementioned changes are the biggest asset alterations, and they seem necessary to avoid certain accusations. It's also likely one or more ratings boards demanded these changes in order to give Xenoblade Chronicles X the target rating. Worse, they may have refused to rate it at all without these changes. However, before these changes were known, there were people talking about other rumored changes. And all of these following rumors turned out to be false. It was rumored that Lin Li's age was changed from 13 to 15. She is introduced as a 13-year-old genius, so obviously this age up never occurred. It was rumored that all of Lin Li's swimwear was removed from the game. It was also rumored that swimwear for all other female characters was altered. Both turned out to be utterly false. Finally, it was rumored that all religious references were removed from the game. Considering there was an entire side quest involving Manon and a cultist sect of suiciders, I don't even need to mention the deeply religious potential party member in Hope, nor do I need to go over how Orphe view the Ova, nor do I need to go over the Zarabogan, who I went over before. Even without waiting for information or attempting to reach out to the media arm of Nintendo, people jumped to conclusions and assumed all rumors to be true, regardless of how ridiculous they sounded. there were massive petitions, which, let's be honest, have rarely, if ever, worked. There were even calls to boycott a game in a typically niche genre anyway. Why? I have to ask why anybody would simply attack a game without ever giving it a chance. I have never understood this. Now, yes, I would prefer a product as close to the original release as possible, but localization efforts and especially rating boards will never make this happen. In my humble opinion, it is a better idea to go after the ratings boards and demand more accountability and expanded ratings. The consumer market has very little control over the regulations imposed by a group of out-of-touch persons who were first created because some people believe that video games made children violent. Until ratings boards change, video game companies will be too afraid to release unchanged products. However, it is also important to note that regional or cultural difference may alter the perception of certain content in games. It's part of the reason video game companies are afraid to release certain games in certain regions. I'd also like to touch on some positive changes that have come out of localization that a lot of people may not know about or overlook. This is off script, and it's mainly because I noticed that I have some time remaining. We look at Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. We look at the character Fawful, to be very specific. The complaints about Fawful originally in the Japanese version were that he was very bland, he was an uninteresting character, and yet in America, in Nintendo of America, Fawful was one of the fan favorite characters. Sometimes localization finds ways of improving things, and this is why we have to be afraid of the idea that everything that is a change is censorship. Changes can be positive when you apply them to localization. Sometimes they are weird and silly, sometimes they are stupid, but sometimes they are positive. And I look at Fawful, and I can't help but think that that is positive. Because I believe, if I remember reviews correctly, they took the American characterization for Fawful and made that his characterization in Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, I believe is the name of the second game. They made Fawful more interesting because they saw that the American audience and the European audience, I believe Europe got the American representation of Fawful, was that representation of Fawful was received very positively, and in fact, people loved that representation. So, my basic point is, let's just not jump to conclusions. Let's wait for review copies to tell us what is true and what is not true, instead of before the game even goes to gold. Because between the time when it is submitted to the time that a review copy goes gold, they may have selected a different version of the game. You know, they may submit multiple versions of the game to review boards to say what is acceptable, what is not. And because of what the review boards say is acceptable and what is not acceptable, what goes out as review gold may be a different product than rumors first speculated. So that's my rant, and in the end, what is my score for Xenoblade Chronicles X? Simply put, I loved this game. I loved playing through it. I enjoyed putting it on my channel for you. I will admit that a few episodes have been copy claimed. I think 3 of them were copy claimed by Nintendo, but they had major cutscenes that were revealed at Nintendo events, so I can kind of understand that. And I'm not complaining, okay? Because that's 3 episodes out of 150. The 2 episodes that I'm going to complain about, though, were claimed by Universal Music. I'm going to complain about that because they're claiming that I'm using their music, and I'm not. And I'm afraid that maybe because Universal Music claimed those two videos, that they're not available in all countries. They may actually be blocked in a couple countries. So I'm going to apologize to anybody who actually enjoyed my series and they can't watch 2 episodes because Universal Music copy claimed them. Regardless, enjoy the last 4 minutes of me just wandering around in Sylvalum as we close out this episode. Until next time, when you actually see me playing... Actually, no. One more thing. My next video will be me wandering through... Oh, great. No, I'm in Noctilum now. My next video will be in Sylvalum. And it will be my review of E3 2016. So look forward to that if you're at all interested. Until then, this is Draco Breach reporting out. God bless and safe travels.
Chew on this. That all you got.
Smooth recovery.
Thanks. There. Who's next? None here stand against us all. Magnum Edge. There. Over slash. Roger that.
Furious blast.
Scary Edge. Nail it. Break out those guns. Let's see him chew on this. Starfall play. Furious blast. So we have to play them.
It's okay, pal. Doing good.
Roger that. Here, over slash. Start running. Furious blast. Magnum Edge.
That's no good.
That all you got.
Now's your chance to weaken.
Back to the ground. Good idea.
Hey,
Down the side.
send some heals this way.
True screaming.
Starfall play.
Furious blast.
Furious blast. Ultra slash. Close it and clean up.
Sorry.
Okay. Like this. Assault hammer. Magnum Edge. Let's see him chew on this. Furious blast. Decoy round. Magnum Edge. True screaming. Now, close and clean up. Okay. It's like this. Furious blast. Hand. Offensive stance. Victory is ours. I guess that's that.